Welcome to episode 197 of the Fully In It podcast. This episode has been years in the making, and I knew I needed to share this story with you. At the end of 2022, I was done with everything. I had just signed my biggest client the month prior, which should have had me on cloud 9, and I was at my complete rock bottom. Then an encounter with God brought me back to my faith after years of pushing it away. I couldn't have anticipated how this would completely change my home, my motherhood, my marriage, and my business, but it absolutely did. This is a raw and real story. Let's go ahead and get into it. Welcome to the Fully In It podcast with Kate Saffel, a show for powerful moms growing life-changing businesses while showing up intentionally for their families. I teach you how to create a family-first and profitable business in less time by leveraging simple strategy, mom life-friendly systems, and above all, the mindset of going fully in it. You ready? So I've been pretty reluctant to share this as it just feels vulnerable to me, and I don't like feeling vulnerable. But I also just knew in my heart it was time to share. I've thought about sharing this for years now, and I've let fear get the best of me. And this has ultimately meant I've kept my faith in a neat and tidy little box, like in the corner over there. And it's part of who I am, and I just don't want to compartmentalize it anymore. But I also feel like you probably want to hear the backstory of like, where is this coming from? And, what does this actually mean to me? And it's really just a story of how God has completely transformed my life, my family, and my business. And so I want to get into this with you. So I'm going to start with this. Today, as of it is September 2025, I have a very healthy and happy home life. And my family is just like, we're so strong as a family unit. We are living out our values truly. We are part of our community, and that feels so satisfying and so good. And my marriage with Kirk is the best it has ever been. We've been married for 18 years, so this is a lot of time. My business is stable. It provides well for our family, and it also doesn't take over my life. It's part of my life, but it isn't my life. You know what I mean? And that was an important shift, which I'm going to get into more here shortly. Kirk also has just the best job ever doing work he loves that provides well. And I've got the most beautiful baby that we're just all so obsessed with as a family. She is a dream come true. And if you listen to my birth episode, you know why. I'm just truly so happy with everything that I have in my life right now. And I was telling a friend the other day that if this is as good as my life ever gets, I am so content. I'm so grateful for everything that I have. And I'm not sharing all of this to brag. And if you're going through a hard time in your life and you're facing challenges, I want you to know you're not alone. I know how you feel because that was my story for years. And a lot of that I just didn't share. I didn't share it on social media or, in any kind of public way because, again, like I said, it felt vulnerable. It didn't feel like something that people would want to hear. And I just thought I will just keep all of these challenges that I'm facing over here. And then I will just kind of, share the good stuff, share the highlight reel. And that's just not real life. And also I think I've realized now, that I've gotten older and I've matured is that the highlight reel is not the satisfying life. It's like a very shallow way to live. How do you know gratitude if you don't experience heartbreaking lows? We need both in this life. That's part of the human experience. And if I avoid one, am I really going to be satisfied by the other? So I share all of this because the happy life I have now, and obviously there's still things that are right. I have a normal life. Things still go wrong and all of that, but like it's a pretty wonderful life. And the fruit that you're seeing in my life now and that I'm experiencing, it was sown years ago. And it was years ago when I was actually at my own rock bottom. There was a moment at the end of 2022, and Kirk and the kids and I and my parents, we were at Disney World, and it was, during the holidays. So we had just spent the day at the parks, and we were just enjoying the Christmas decorations and getting treats, and like everything was wonderful. Like it should have been. I had just recently signed my biggest client yet. And there was money in my bank account that I had only ever dreamed of, right? Like this was it. I had everything I thought I wanted. And I was so miserable. I couldn't stop crying that day. It's like weird, to be at Disney World and to be crying. I was having thoughts that were scaring me. And I remember standing outside the car at the end of the day. It was nighttime and we were getting ready to head back home, and I was just sobbing. And Kirk was like, what is going on, right? He was just trying to figure out what had happened, but I had just snapped. It was just like everything I'd been holding in, and it just suddenly started pouring out like a dam had broken. We were on the 3rd floor of a parking garage, and I remember looking over the railing and just thinking how much easier it would be if I wasn't there. Which is like kind of scary to admit, but that was the place I had gotten to, and I felt so alone and so lost and so scared. And, at the depth of that low, right? And it's like, where do I go from here? And, Kirk is like, get in the car. And I'm like, I can't get in the car. And in that moment, a woman's name popped in my head. It was a counselor that I had met in 2019 at a business conference. She had given a talk, right? And so this is 2022. I had met her how many years ago? It was like 4 years, something like that prior. I didn't even know her, right? I just saw her talk, and her name pops in my head. And I remember that she specialized in this certain kind of treatment that she would use with people who had PTSD and other difficult things that they were trying to overcome. And so I grabbed my phone, and it's like probably 9:30 p.m. and I called her. And I left this shaky message on her voicemail, crying. I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine what that would have been like to be on the other end of receiving that. She called me back 5 minutes later and told me to come in on Monday and see her. And I can look back now and I can see God's hand in that moment, breaking the dangerous thoughts that were playing in my mind, providing me a pathway out of my pain, the pain that nobody was seeing because it was all highlight reel. And he brought me back into his peace that surpasses all understanding. But you're probably wondering, how had I gotten to that point? That's a question I've asked myself so many times. How did this happen? It was a slippery slope of sinking into ways of being that were not aligned with my faith. It was me trying to become the God of my own life, to do it all, to be the one, to make everything happen. And you know what? It worked for a while. I could manifest with the best of them, and I had the results to show for it. But here's the thing. When it isn't working, then there is no one to blame except yourself. No one else to turn to. You're all alone in it because you were the one who made that happen. So what happened was that I kept trying to find things outside of me that would get me results faster. I was on this treadmill to success, to making something of myself that would launch me to that next level in business. And it was kind of like a really fun time in the coaching world. There was a lot of things happening. There was a lot of optimism and positivity of yeah, you can do whatever you want. You can create whatever you want. And Ultimately, that led me out of my faith and into practices that open doors to spiritually unhealthy places. There's so much more I want to share here. I really I sat with this before I started, outlining the episode, and I was like, gosh, what do I share and what do I not share? And so I'm putting a little bookmark here because some of the specifics I'm saving for my future book. I just am. So if you're a publisher or an agent, I have got the wildest story for you, story of faith and losing it and coming back out on the other side. And here's the thing, 2021, I was in such a bad place. I couldn't sleep. I went weeks without sleeping and experienced some pretty awful things again. I'm going to write the book. I'm going to write the book and I will share all of this. But for now, I will say this. It was an awful 3 weeks of my life that I still look back and I'm like, I don't know how I went through that. I was so desperate for relief that the only thing that broke the bad place I found myself in was cracking open a dusty Bible. And I began sleeping through the night again that night. But I didn't stick with it. And like a toxic relationship, I kept going back to these practices thinking that this time it would be different. And it never was. So that was 2021. And a year later, I found myself in the exact same place, right? At Disney, crying my eyes out, just being completely over it all. So I went and I met with that counselor, and the first thing she asked me was if I was a Christian. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a odd question. I mean, don't you think? I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't sure in that moment what I believed. And so I just said, well, I don't know. I kind of am. I kind of hedged around it because for years I had been dancing around that question. I had been steadily moving away from my faith and had become very lukewarm and taking God for granted, only calling on him when I was in a really bad bind and needing help, and then forgetting him after things were all good again. So she led me through a bod session, which was the most emotionally, mentally taxing thing I have ever experienced in my life. And then at the end, she talked to me about needing to push the devil away. And I was like, okay, what is this? Oh man. And again, I was in such a bad place. I would anything you tell me to do, I will do it. I just want to feel better. And so, I was just so grateful for her help. I asked her, what do I need to do? Come back and how often should I plan to see you for sessions? And she was like, oh no, this is all that was all that you needed. She said, go live your life, Kate, and be happy. She said, you won't even need another session. And she didn't even charge me. And she just sent me on my way. And I just think what a gift from God that was, because that was the turning point in my life. And the next 3 months, it kind of all played out. I was exhausted. I took naps every day. I almost all but paused my business because I was spending most of my time just laying on the couch. I wasn't depressed. That's the thing. I wasn't depressed. I was, I don't know if happy is the right word, but something had shifted in my soul. And it felt like peace was coming back into my life, this deep-seated peace. And my body was adjusting to feeling that peace again. And it was around this time that I felt this really strong urge to go back to church because we hadn't gone in years. Kirk was working on the weekends at the time. So I started taking the kids by myself, which is a really big deal because I'm always that person that I don't like going new places with the kids by myself, especially like a community experience like that. I'm like, what are people going to say? What are they going to be like? Is it going to be awkward? Are people going to talk to me? What's going to happen? But I couldn't ignore that urge. And so I just followed it, right? I just followed that nudge. And I would sit in church every Sunday, holding back tears. Sometimes not holding them back, sometimes just like crying and then feeling like embarrassed for crying in church. But I was trying to figure out how my life had gotten to that point, and also simultaneously like overwhelmed with gratitude to feel held again by God, to not have to hold it all on my shoulders and be the one to figure everything out and save everything. I didn't have to be the savior of my life anymore. And this is when new seeds were being planted in my life, in my home, and in my business. Seeds that were the dream of being a faithful family, of being rooted in a community, of Kirk getting his dream job, and of having another baby. Here's the thing. I had achieved everything I thought I wanted in my business. The big cash months, the travel, the time freedom, the reputation. And you know what? It did not satisfy. The chasing of it only etched out a bigger hole in my soul. And don't hear me wrong here. Ambition, especially when it's part of your calling on earth, is a good thing. Being able to financially provide for your family is a good thing. Having a big impact and serving others is a good thing. But it's the place from which you do it that matters. And for me, it had become my everything and it had crowded out God. Everything was out of balance, and that was what led to me hitting rock bottom in 2021 and 2022. But the more I felt God's love for me, the less I needed external validation in my business. I had nothing to prove anymore. My worth wasn't found in what I could do, and I jumped off that treadmill of tying my worth to externals. I knew that no matter what I did, I was loved by God and my family, and that was enough. So in 2023, I began reading my Bible and praying every single day before I did anything else. I started falling back in love with Jesus and who he was and is. And I started bringing the shift into my home, praying with the kids and sharing my faith journey with them, being honest about everything I had gone through, obviously at a kid-friendly level, but they had been there to witness everything. And kids are so wise. They were surprised, but you know what? They were hungry for a deeper relationship with God too. And I also threw out anything in our home that was a remnant of that old way of being. It was a line in the sand moment, and the feeling of our home began to change and feel more stable, warm, and happy. I began changing up my business too. Maybe you didn't even notice, but I did. I removed anything new age that had seeped into my business. Those ideas had saturated so many of my trainings that I had to scrape most of it and start over. I met another mom entrepreneur around this time who was going through a similar transition in her business. Like her heart was in the exact same place. And hearing her share how she had burned down her business gave me courage to also change the way I did mine. I knew that changing how I did business and how I communicated online and all of that could very well lose me clients. And it was scary to let go of that control, but I felt like I didn't have a choice. Like it had to be done. So I made my focus, on having a family first business and teaching that and exemplifying that for my community. And for me also, it was really about being faith first. I tried to make all of my decisions, like personal, business, all the things, through prayer first and seeking God. And I don't do this perfectly, but I began shifting that habit, and then the habit shifted my life because I learned to feel peaceful and stable instead of addicted to the dopamine of highs and lows. I slowed down. I actually started to feel the things in my life that I had been avoiding for years. And it would be really fun to be like, yeah, I changed my business and then my income exploded. We want that, right? We want that story. But God doesn't always work that way. And I think it's actually a really good thing because I don't know that I would have been able to handle it if that had happened. I think I would have been tempted to go back into my old ways. And so I burned down offers in my business and my income dipped. And I had to accept that. But this taught me to trust God even more with everything, because remember, I had learned to lean on only me to create business success. And now I was learning to lean on God. He was so faithful through it all as I learned to do business His way. The really cool thing that also happened, so it was like, I'm like seeing this ripple effect, right, in all these different areas of my life. And another one that changed was my marriage. So we went from me being the sole provider of the family, me like retiring my husband, like that was super exciting and all that. It was very much like an ego thing of like, hey, look what I did. And now he is the provider in the family and my business income is supplemental. We were able to balance our feminine and masculine responsibilities because it was so out of whack. It was so out of whack and it didn't feel good. Doing this took the pressure off of me and gave me the ability to finally relax because I had been holding on to so much. And this meant that our marriage became more joyful as we balanced our roles into a more traditional pattern. It felt like we were dating again, like it just so much more joy and peace between us. And that was when we began to talk more seriously about having another baby, because it just like that wasn't going to happen when I was the sole provider. I mean, could it have happened? Yeah, it could have. But I knew in my heart, I like couldn't do that to myself. I couldn't, be the maternal mother and having a baby and also trying to be the breadwinner for the family. I just didn't want to do it. And so I was so grateful for the timing in all of this. And I think I may have shared in the birth story, but I don't know. But Kirk got his job that he has now, his new job. He got the offer the day before my due date with our youngest. Like, God is so good. Like, how do you even explain that timing, right? So I was able to lean back into being mom first and businesswoman second. And this just has led to such a beautiful season of life for me where I feel more creative at home and I'm doing things I hadn't done in so many years because I was just so business and success oriented. And that was like all I was giving my attention to. But I had started asking God, please show me your plan for my life. And I was willing to completely let go of my business if it was necessary. If that was what He was asking of me, I was like, I'll do it. I'll do it. And after our fourth was born at the beginning of this year, I did wonder if it was time to let the business go. That went through my mind of like, maybe it is. But I found that my calling to help other mothers has only deepened and feels even more meaningful because it's less about me and it's more about them. That's been one of the greatest shifts I've experienced. And this has also led to conversations about faith with my clients. Like I'm seeing it showing up in my coaching relationships, and faith has become this beautiful bridge between me and my clients of different religious traditions. So that brings me to today, right? Sharing this with you. Because if you and I were sitting down to coffee and you asked me, what do you value most, Kate? Today, I would tell you that it's God first, followed by my family and marriage, and finally my business. Putting my life back into that order has brought me the peace that seemed to always escape me. It was always just a bit out of reach, but it isn't any longer. And years of anxiety have melted away. Like my equilibrium in my body is just completely different now. And I feel so full of unshakable peace, and truly only God could do that. So that's my story. It's out there. Now it is out in the world. And if this episode spoke to you in some way, right, please feel free to email me at hello@happierandmotherhood.com. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to my story of faith and being with me on this journey. I'm so grateful for you, and I will see you on the next episode.